Can I get your name, where you're from, and who you're working with?
Yeah, my name is Gracey, and I'm originally from rural Pennsylvania. I'm here with Sustain Us, but my role is really to work with coordinating the international youth called Youngo.
Thanks, Kyle. And you were in Cancun last year, right?
Yep.
Cool. Do you think you can talk a little bit about what your experience was and what came out of Cancun?
Sure. So, what came out of Cancun was progress in the process. We moved forward on countries agreeing to different things in the negotiations, everything from finance to technology transfer to at least a process for agreeing on new commitments around cutting our greenhouse gas pollution. What didn't actually come out of the process was actual commitments to cut our greenhouse gases, or very much money from especially wealthier, high-polluting countries to help the world and themselves, and especially developing countries, to deal with climate change impacts and to stop climate change. So we got progress in the process, not that much progress in actually stopping climate change.
Right. And so now moving into COP17 and the negotiations in Durban, looking ahead, what do you expect is actually going to come out of these negotiations this year?
So right now what we're on track for is some kind of resolution about the Kyoto Protocol and its future. Probably some kind of roadmap for when we're going to finish negotiating a new legally binding agreement. A process for putting more money toward climate finance. And creating sort of the internal process for making sure that happens. And more movement on international transfer of clean energy technologies.
Do you think you could talk a little bit more about what is going on in the world of climate finance?
Yeah, so last 2 years were kind of a big deal in this because we actually created this thing called the Green Climate Fund, which is a specific pot of money to fund climate change work around the world, and especially in developing countries. So this is actually trying to put money toward meeting commitments to stop climate change. But what we created was the pot, not the actual money. So now we have to fill the pot, and we haven't filled the pot very much. There isn't very much money. Countries said by 2020 they would be spending $100 billion, industrialized, high-polluting countries, $100 billion out in the world to stopping climate change through this Green Climate Fund. And they had to figure out where that money's going to come from. Right now, there isn't very much money at all, because they also said that in the 3 years from Copenhagen through basically next year, they were going to spend something like $30 billion on what they call fast start financing to get this process going and then start to bridge that gap between that $30 billion and the $100 billion per year that they said that they were going to have by 2020. So we don't have all that money yet. And we don't have a total process for getting that money yet. What we have made progress on is sources that might be useful for creating those funds. So we basically this Green Climate Fund had a transitional committee that was created this last year. And the goal of that committee was to figure out the plan for where this money might come from and what the Green Climate Fund would look like, who would administer it, what all the sort of rules would be to make sure that we met our goals, and then find a way to report back to the negotiations to say, here's where we are, here's what we have done, here's what we haven't done. And so they've basically done that. They've met throughout the year and almost reached an agreement on what the Green Climate Fund is going to look like and some sense of where the money might come from. But all the channels, all we've done is identify them. We haven't actually started using those channels to fill the pot.
Yep.
So that's sort of where we are. The process is good, but it's just a process. We have to actually follow the process now, and that's sort of where we have to be. We have to go from after Durban. Is to finish our agreement and agree that this is what the money is going to come from, and this is how we're going to do it. And the Green Climate Fund is the way to do it, and then make it happen.
Right, so it sounds like especially in Durban, climate finance and big decisions are going to be really important.
They could be, yeah.
We were following the conclusion of the fourth transitional committee in South Africa recently.
Yeah, it wasn't much of a conclusion.
Wasn't much of a conclusion. Do you think that you could speak a little bit about the state or status of the interim trustee, specifically the World Bank, and what is that looking like?
Right. So the World Bank was designated as the sort of the organization to manage the money. So not decide what projects the money was going to be spent on. People were very clear and upset about any other role for the World Bank except as an administrator. So they were just going to administer the money. And civil society pushed very hard to make sure that they didn't do anything else. They didn't have control over the money. They didn't decide about it. It was just administered. And even then, a lot of people felt they were uncomfortable with the World Bank being in that role. A lot of other people also said, well, if it's not the World Bank, we don't know who it would be, because the UNFCCC, they haven't really managed money that well. They haven't had this experience to deal with money around the world the way that actually the World Bank has a lot of experience doing it. So even if you think the World Bank is flawed, give us a better solution. There probably aren't any. That's the argument. So that's where we are. The World Bank is this trustee, they call it, up through at least 2013. And then we are going to look back and sort of decide what the role of the World Bank will be in the future. Are they going to keep being the trustee? Is someone else going to be the trustee? Are they going to keep being the trustee, but we'll put new conditions and rules on how they administer it? But it's funny, when you don't have any money to administer, it's really hard to decide whether you're doing a good job of administering it or not. So the role of the World Bank right now actually hasn't been that much, because they don't have any money to play with.
Last question. A lot of folks today have talked about what their expectations are versus their hopes for Durbin, and a lot of folks have said that the expectation is different than what they hope. If this was a quote-unquote perfect world, and we all could make an agreement, what would you like to see actually, coming out of these negotiations?
I mean, that's why we create these movements, because if our expectations were the same as what we thought was going to happen, then the process doesn't need us. We're here to change what we think will happen to what we need to happen. And so my expectations are that I expect we should stop climate change, like today. I mean, that's actually what we need. Where I think where we are right now, is that we don't know where Kyoto is going. It's very uncertain. We don't know where a legal instrument is going to be, a legally binding agreement for everybody. We're getting there, but it could be years and years from now before we agree to it. That's not fast enough. We need this stuff now. We need the money today, and we need the technology transfer. I mean, we all need it today. That's what we need. That's what the process and the world and the people suffering from climate change, that's what they need to have happen. So that's what I want out of this process. I mean, that's today. It should be done. And we're going to do everything we can to get us as close to that goal as possible.
Cool. Well, thank you, Kyle.
Thanks.